Thrivers are made, not born. Once you realize you have power and control over this, mom and dad, it means you're going to change your whole parenting outlook because you realize, my gosh, what a gift I can give my child. The greatest gift, because he's going to use this the rest of his life.
Welcome to Tilt Parenting, a podcast featuring interviews and conversations aimed at inspiring, informing, and supporting parents raising differently wired kids. I'm your host, Debbie Reber. My guest for this episode is internationally recognized educational psychologist, Dr. Michele Borba. She also happens to be a friend of mine, and she is fantastic. Michele is one of those guests I've been wanting to bring onto the show for a while now, so I am thrilled to finally have her on. And it could not come at a better time. Her new book, Thrivers, The Surprising Reason Why Some Kids Struggle and Others Shine, is packed with simple strategies, practical ideas, and step-by-step advice to help kids thrive. And it is the book we all need right now. If Michele's name is familiar, it may be because she's a regular contributor to the Today Show and is the author or co-author of a number of best-selling parenting books, including The Big Book of Parenting Solutions, 12 Simple Secrets Real Moms Know, Unselfie, and more. In this conversation, Michele and I talk about what it takes for a child to thrive, looking at 7 particular character traits, and explore what we as parents can do to help our child develop the resilience they need to become self-actualized adults. Yes, even in spite of a global pandemic. I loved having this conversation with Michele and the energy and optimism she brings to this moment in time. I hope you enjoy it too. And now, here is my conversation with Michele. Hello, Michele. Welcome to the Tilt Parenting Podcast.
Oh, thank you. I'm so glad to be here.
I'm so excited to talk about your amazing new book. It's so good and it's so timely for right now. But before we get into that, I always have guests tell me a little bit about their story. And you have such an incredible career and an incredible body of work. But I would love to hear about kind of your why, your personal why for the work that you do in the world.
My personal why is probably 40 years back. I started out as a special education teacher, and I always worried, as we all do, about some kids because they were facing such adversity. But I kept seeing that some of them were struggling a little less, even though they all seemed to have very much difficulties. And along the way, I worked in almost every grade level, and I began to see the same thing. But Debbie, I had to write this book was when I started doing interviews of teens just prior to the pandemic. And I asked them point blank, 100 of them on one-on-one interviews, I hear you're the most stressed out generation on record. What's causing it? Every kid said we are. And every kid said we feel like we're running on empty. I said, why? And many of them said, I think it's because we feel like we're being raised as products, not human beings. And we're missing the skills on how to be humans. That's when I realized they're missing the skills on how to thrive. And that's what our kids need.
Yes, so much. And just this idea of resilience seems to be this elusive quality, I think, that we're all chasing. And we're talking about it so much now because we're wondering what does this pandemic mean? Is it going to result in a more resilient generation? And that's why, again, I just feel like your book is so timely. And I will also just say that you had said you were done writing books when your last book came out. So, but this book just had to be written.
This was such an extreme pressing need driven by kids that I had to. The other thing I kept seeing, Debbie, is that this thing on resilience is really being touted to us as a myth. It's not scientifically based. And so we're going the wrong framework. We all want a resilient kid. There's no doubt about that. But what I saw was what the science says on how to produce one based on what we were doing were just in odds. Mm-hmm. And the second thing, probably most important, is we weren't realizing that it's not tied into IQ or GPA. It's not part of your DNA. Resilient children are made, not born. Then when I broke it down and looked at these incredible longitudinal studies, I mean, phenomenal studies that have looked at the same kid for 40 years who overcame obstacles. What I began to do is pull all the character traits they said they had. I've looked at really about 7, the most amazing studies, and I began to see, wow, they have some commonalities here. So I zeroed in on, here's the 7 most critical traits. They seem to be the 7 ones that our kids right this moment need, and then figured out the 3 abilities in each one that are teachable, and then found family-friendly ways to weave them into our homes so we're not going to overwhelm ourselves. So we all raise kids who can thrive without us someday. That's the goal.
Well, and what I loved about your book too was, as the parent of a differently wired child, and I know my listeners will relate to this, so many parenting books that are kind of more mainstream, they weren't written for parents whose kids are atypical. We often feel as if they're not speaking to us, or, what's suggested, it would not work for my family. And I completely did not have that experience reading your book. I just felt like, yes, this all speaks to me. I love that you talk about that these kids are made, not born. And, that this is something that we as parents can have so much influence over, really helping our kids move forward from that strengths perspective and really know themselves well. And so it just fit in so nicely with the philosophy of what I do at Tilt.
That's exactly what I was hoping. I was really also hoping to prove that we can make a difference, that every child has the ability to shine in their own way. My favorite thing was not only going into classrooms that are doing it and finding proof that you can. So each chapter starts with a story that I'm really there. From the most amazing story was a Beirut refugee camp. And I'm going, my gosh, if they can do it, we can do it. Mm-hmm. But also finding stories about real kids who had enormous obstacles, like Jim Abbott. Michael Phelps, who has ADHD, but his mom found him a swimming pool, and that's where he said he could shine. If we keep going about breaking those myths and say, hey, we can do it, we've just got to go the path of where our child is, figure out who they are. That's how we're going to make the difference, and then help them learn a few of these little skills along the way. That's the real takeaway here.
Mm-hmm. Let's talk about the term thrivers even. So I'm just going to recap the book is called Thrivers, The Surprising Reasons Why Some Kids Struggle and Others Shine. And you use this term thrivers to describe kids who have what it takes to do well in the world. Yeah. So how would you define a child who's thriving?
I think it's a kid who's really got that kind of, I got this kind of a kid. He's got agency. He can go his own way. He's kind of ready for life, whatever gets him down. He can pick up, brush himself off, pick up the pieces and keep on going. And the only way you're going to get there is with 2 things. He's got some protective factors, those abilities that Thrivers has, and also that parent who says, you do have this, I'm there for you, but you go, sweet pie. You put those 2 together, that's the win-win formula.
Will you walk us through these 7 traits? We don't have time to go into depth in each one, but even just kind of share, because I think they are all critical. And I think they are all things that we as parents, no matter how our child is wired, can play a really active role in helping our kids develop.
And at any age, that's the other thing. Makes no difference. So don't you say it's too late or it's too early. Neither one work in terms of thrivers. I picked 7. The 7 traits also work to helping kids develop strong hearts, minds, and will. So number 1 is self-confidence. That's a child who knows who he is, who his personal strengths are, what brings him joy. That needs to be instilled. The second one is empathy. Because what we now know is the single greatest way to help our kids have strong mental health is relationships, which is tough in a social distance world. So we need to cultivate that one up a little bit, and there are ways. Then comes the qualities of mind, self-control. We've got to figure out how to help our kids buffer that stress, manage the anxiety at the level they can. That's doable. Then comes integrity, because I am so concerned about making sure, regardless of these other strengths, if you don't have integrity, that's the strength that's going to help a child know I can't do this or I can do this because that's my code that mom has instilled in me. That's going to take a lot of pressure off if you can point the path. Curiosity. I love that one because I found that that's the strength that gives our kids an open-mindedness, not only to people, but to ideas, and helps them keep on going. That builds that strength. The final ones are perseverance, so you don't stop, you keep on going. And then the one that every kid needs, an adult needs right now, is optimism and hope. The key that I found fascinating is that every parent always said, so which is the most important strength? It isn't. It's the one that really drives your child. But the key to keep in mind is that there's a multiplier effect. If you add any two strengths together, it increases the odds of success. So if you put perseverance plus curiosity together, oh my gosh, you got a mindset of an innovator. You put self-control plus perseverance, he's not going to quit. He's going to keep on going. We've made resilience too often as a one-trait program, when in reality, there's a multiplier. If you put them together, boy, that just boosts the odds. And
it really is like building a muscle, right? Like this, yes. These are things that we can get momentum over time. So, I think so many of us, we might be listening to these traits and like, oh my gosh, like this does not describe my child at all. And how do I get them from where they are now to where they are? But this is something that we can cultivate. Exactly. And you said one thing over time that is a fabulous phrase, because the other thing, it's not one-time lecture. It's 6:00, but I told him to have empathy. Why isn't he doing it? You keep stretching your child. The other part is in the introduction before you even get going. It has a 3-page checklist so you can identify who my child is. Which of his strengths does he already have? Which abilities does he need? And then each of the strengths is broken down into the 3 skills that science says are teachable with dozens of activities throughout Thrivers, age by age, that you can start to instill. It is so practical. And that's one of the things I loved about it. I am one of those people, and you may know this because you know me a bit, that, I'm really good at like with the check sheets and following instructions and filling out charts and like, to-do lists. Like I love a good plan. You are, yes, you are. But I love that you do equip us with so many ideas and strategies for working on these, all of these traits. We'll be right back after this quick break. During this month of planning and organization for big transitions, rhythms and routines have been absolutely essential for our physical and emotional well-being. So Green Chef nights are reliably and predictably a good night. We know the ingredients will be fresh and prepped, the instructions easy to follow, and the meal delicious. We're all still talking about last week's turkey tacos with mango chimichurri sauce, refried beans, and Monterey Jack cheese. Green Chef contributes to a healthy lifestyle with easy and delicious menus like fresh seasonal salads and grain bowls. And with over 80 weekly meal and market options, plus rotating options to suit a variety of lifestyles, whether Mediterranean, plant-based, calorie-smart, keto, protein-packed, gluten-free, there are always plenty of options to choose from. Whatever you select, you'll get farm-fresh ingredients, organic whole fruits and veggies, and premium proteins, all delivered straight to your door. I love those 4 words. Straight to my door. Oh, and one more thing I love about Green Chef, they have an app, which means it's easy to manage meal preferences and delivery from your phone if you want to. And I, for one, want to. I am in that mode where I'm making the most of little moments like waiting in line at the pharmacy or for the F train to pull into the station to tackle all of those to-dos. So the convenience of an app is key for me. Green Chef has a special offer for Tilt listeners. Go to greenchef.com/tilt50 and use code TILT50 to get 50% off plus 20% off your next 2 months. That's 50% off plus 20% off your next 2 months when you use the code TILT50 at greenchef.com/tilt50. Maybe I've watched too many seasons of The Amazing Race, but every time I have to go somewhere on the subway, I treat it like a competition. It's all about making the right gut decisions about which route will get me there the fastest. Sometimes those decisions get me where I'm going early, and other times my gambles don't really pay off. Probiotics can't help with most gut decisions, but if your gut needs a little support, Ritual has your back. Their Synbiotic Plus, a 3-in-1 supplement, has clinically studied prebiotics, probiotics, and a postbiotic to support a balanced gut microbiome. I've been using Synbiotic Plus for about 6 months now, and it's become a core part of my morning routine. I take the mini capsule every morning while making my way through my inbox, whether I'm at home or I'm on the road, because it doesn't need to be refrigerated. And the capsule itself is delayed released, which helps it survive the harsh conditions of the upper GI tract for delivery to the colon, and that's exactly where we want it to go. Ritual invested in a study modeling the human colon, which showed that Synbiotic Plus significantly increased microbial diversity and the growth of beneficial bacteria. There's no more shame in your gut game. Synbiotic Plus and Ritual are here to celebrate, not hide your insides. Get 25% off your first month for limited time at ritual.com/tilt. Start Ritual or add Symbiotic Plus to your subscription today. That's ritual.com/tilt for 25% off. And I'm wondering, do you have like a favorite of these 7 strengths? Is there any one that you feel like is a great place to start or that you think can pack the most punch?
Yeah, pack the most punch. Being we're in a pandemic generation, I'd say hope. Because I think what happens is that when hope and optimism goes down, kids see the world as a mean and scary place. And there goes their strength reserve. And what are they seeing right now? The most dismal news you could possibly imagine. And if it's not a pandemic and it's not a capital rising, it's going to be something else along the way. We do know that hope also is one of the best ways to reduce depression and reduce anxiety. So maybe the simplest little thing you can do right now that I love is helping your child see the good news. It's the Fred Rogers idea. Look for the helpers instead of the bad stuff. Let's look for the news that's usually in the back pages hidden. You can cut out that news that's fabulous. The best ones are also stories about real kids because that resonates with a child and inspires them. Paste them on just index cards. Put them on your dining room table. And every night or right before your child goes to bed, review some of them. Thrivers has many stories about kids, but those resonated with me. Find the ones that resonate with your child. Even better, have your teen find the story. Mom, I found one. And then sit down together because that's going to give hope.
I wanted to ask you about the assessment with the character strengths. As I was going through that, my hunch was, I was thinking, I bet, many of my listeners might go through this and score, their child quite low in a lot of these areas.
Yes.
And so do you have any thoughts for how a parent could feel more optimistic about their child's ability to develop these traits, even if it feels like, gosh, we are so far from where we want to go?
Remember, step number 1 is no matter what you do with your child, I don't care if it's trying to help them learn to play tennis, swim, color, you scaffold it. So where's the child at? And you gently, gently, gently take them up a notch. I always tell parents, think of a rubber band. Your goal is to gently stretch your child, but don't you dare snap them. And that means we've got to figure out where our child is, what their capabilities are, and keep on going. Second, one of the most amazing studies was by just Grizel and Grizel. And what they did is look at 700 of the most highly gifted and talented individuals in our century. We're talking about the leaders of the world. 1/4 of them would have been in a special education classroom. They were identified with learning disabilities. But what did they have? The gift of a parent who said, but here's what you're good at, sweetie pie. Go this way. I was very concerned on how much the research was saying. Too often what we do as parents is focus on our kids' weaknesses. He's not so good at that area, so I got to get him good on that one. And we overlook the strength area, which is where he's going to shine.
Yes, love that. And that is, that's very much a part of what I talk a lot about is the strengths-based lens. And it sometimes can be hard to find those strengths, but it really is about helping our kids know themselves so well and understand who they are, what they need to move through the world so that they can create what they want. And that's where I guess that is almost what resilience is, right?
It is. It is. And maybe your first step, that's the easiest one, is just to pack an index card and a pencil with you for the next month and watch your kid. And every time you see where he's interested, what gives him joy, what is he working on that he doesn't want to quit? Sorry, Mom, I can't go to dinner. I'm really on this. When you keep looking at those and writing them down without him noticing that you're doing so, it'll be very often an aha moment. Then your next aha moment is, okay, now I've figured out this profile of this incredible child of mine. Who am I going to pass it on to? We overwhelm ourselves trying to do this all ourselves. Well, he's got other caregivers in his life who adore him, the grandparent, the other partner, the aunt and uncle, the teacher. The more we partner together, and at least with somebody who's your child's champion, the more likely your child is going to be reinforced for that trait. And there goes another ability to stretch them.
Right. Yeah, I really loved, I printed out the assessment. I think it's available for people who want to check it out. And it was so insightful because so many of us are taking assessments all the time. for an IEP meeting, for, an intake for other assessments. And they tend to focus on the trouble areas, the challenging areas. And so to take this and really think about all these different types of strengths and not just kind of creativity. And, there are all these little buckets. It was so interesting to me to recognize.
I'm so glad. Because the other thing we seem to do is that we put all our time and energy into the GPA and the test score. Mm-hmm. That's one element of your child. And we overlook the whole kid of who this child is, this incredible human being that we're going to help. And I love that. When I heard from the kids, it's like raises for who we are, not for what you want us to be.
Yeah.
That's a great takeaway for a parent.
100%. And we know that these kids, their success and ability to live self-fulfilled lives is going to be finding work and finding a way to move through the world where they can really lean into those strengths. So to help them discover them and grow them is so important. So let's just talk about the pandemic for a few minutes, a little more specifically, because I think, again, I've said a couple times, I think your book is so critical right now. We are so concerned, right? And we've talked about this offline as well, just what our kids are experiencing. What does this mean for them? How is it going to change them? And I'm just wondering, what insight or advice you have right now for parents who are kind of going to that despair place and aren't sure if their kids are going to be able to come out the other end of all of this with their mental, emotional well-being intact?
I think the most important piece of advice I learned from working in war zones. And I point blank asked some kids, how did you make it through? Unbelievable horrors. I mean, unbelievable. If you imagine going through a war. And the best takeaway that I kept getting was that my parents just were always calm. It's like during the Blitz, I remember interviewing a journalist and I asked her, how did you get through nightly bombings like that? And she said, I don't know, but for some reason, I don't remember the bombings. I remember my grandparents pulling the blinds, so there was a blackout, and we play Ring Around the Rosie and sing games all night. They were calm. So the first thing is we've got to stay calm and take care of ourselves because that mirrors down to our children. Second of all, we've got to realize I've got 3 kids. They're different as night and day. Watch each child because each is going to respond a little differently. We do know children who had pre-existing issues. If they were fearful before the pandemic, if they had stress before the pandemic, it only amplifies. So here's if there's a silver lining, moment to tune into your child and say, this is a problem. So how am I going to help remediate that particular issue? Every child needs to feel safe. They need to feel accepted, and they need to be in an environment that has trust. That means us. So I think that's your reoccurring little, we're going to get through this. We're okay. Find soothing activities. And what I learned from Emmy Werner's research on resilience was mind-boggling. The children who had the adversity, who overcame, first had something to go to in its place. For instance, hobbies kept coming up over and over again. I'd go read, or I'd go do woodwork, or we'd do puzzles. Ruby Bridges, unbelievable, that child who endured every day going into a school during desegregation all by herself with angry mobs screaming and yelling at her, all by herself as the only Black child who had to be in a first grade classroom alone because nobody else would allow their children to be in the class. How did you survive it? Well, I prayed because that's what my mother taught me to do. We need to teach our kids some kind of coping skill, not through the pandemic, but also starting here that they're going to use the rest of their lives, because let us know it is an uncertain world that will continue.
Yes, this is true. And I think about this too, as we come out of this and, vaccinations are more widely distributed and we kind of start to resume normalcy. I think it's also important for us to know that it's not going to be a snap of the fingers and our kids are going to bounce right back. Like they're going to need ongoing support and coping strategies and tools to reintegrate, right?
Well, I think we've got immunization against the pandemic. Now we need to immunize our kids against stress. Mm-hmm. What are you going to do to teach your child how to cope? Because every time you turn on the TV, It's something else. There's some unpredictable event. Unpredictability continues to boost the stress. So your first thing, if a family, if you could do one thing just for the next 2 weeks, watch your child and every other family member and figure out how they respond to stress, because it's different for each one. And then acknowledge it. It's not a time out. It's a time in. I notice that every time you get a little stressed, you're the one that has your hand in a fist, or you're the one that starts to move your feet back and forth. You're the one that starts to do that rapid breathing. Have you noticed that's what you do? They'll start pointing out your stress. Mm-hmm. Have you noticed, Mom, you do that weird thing with your eyes? How great it is that we all start acknowledging each other. Mm-hmm. And then I think a wonderful next step is, so what are we going to do about it? Now that we know, or we can point our signs out to each other, because that's that strength of self-control. Now what you could do maybe is put together in your house a calm down corner, and your kids can help you build it. It's nothing you have to buy. It's maybe the beanbag chairs or the pillows in a corner. And then you ask each child, what do you need? One kid will say, I love books. That's what I need to go back. Okay, then stock it with books. One kid, a child told me, a teen, I just load my iPad with music. And I love it. She told me that my generation was far better because we have less beats in our music. So I loaded with your kind of music, and I know we finally got some credit for something, because it helps me soothe. Bubble blowers for some kids, it makes no difference. But what will happen is when your child needs to really calm down, set up a calm down, just signal in your family like an umpire signal. Don't say a thing, because some kids are verbal and they'll whip you down. But that means I need space. You use it as well. Go to the calm down corner, reduce the stress. And pretty soon after the pandemic, you can make sure that each child has one of those in their own bedroom, a place where we can all just de-stress and relax.
Mm-hmm. That's great. Great advice. We'll be right back after this quick break. Hey there, it's Debbie. I love making this show and sharing conversations about how to support our awesome neurodivergent kids. I've seen how even one little insight from an interview can spark a big shift in daily life. But I know that raising complex kids can be messy and lonely. And just when we think we figured it out, something comes up that boots us right back to feeling overwhelmed and stuck. That's why I've poured everything into creating a way for parents like us navigating complex parenting journeys to join together and chart a path that feels positive, hopeful, and doable. It's the brand new Differently Wired Club experience. In the club, you'll get personal support from me and other seasoned parent coaches, 6 live calls every month where you can connect and get your personal questions answered, the opportunity to learn directly from authors and experts like I have on this show, monthly themes for getting specific and tactical, an exclusive private podcast feed, and the best, most generous community of parents. Seriously, these folks show up for themselves and each other, and that right there is really everything, because it's a daily reminder that we're not alone. Our kids aren't broken, and we have totally got this. The recently rebooted Differently Wired Club is on a brand new platform with its very own iOS and Android app. It is such a great space. However you learn, whatever your style, no matter the ages, genders, and neurodivergent profile of your children, the Differently Wired Club can help you cultivate the positive shifts you're hoping for. Join us today by going to tiltparenting.com/club. That's tiltparenting.com/club. I hope to see you on the inside.
Are you overwhelmed by the things that get in the way of you doing what you want to do? Are you looking for ways to simplify life to better align with your values? Do you want to create space in your schedule so you have room for more of the good stuff? Play, joy, relationships, gratitude, and more? If you answered yes to any of these questions, I invite you to check out Edit Your Life, a podcast to help you edit the unnecessary from your life so you have more room to enjoy the awesome. Through episodes with me, Christine Coe, and a range of super smart, compassionate, and thoughtful guests, you'll come away with big picture insights and practical ways to declutter your home, schedule, and mental space without getting bogged down by perfection. I have always believed that small moments and actions matter tremendously. My goal is to help you find agency and space in your life through doable baby steps that will leave you feeling accomplished instead of overwhelmed. Check out Edit Your Life wherever you enjoy your podcasts.
So there's a quote that I pulled out from your book that I loved. It says, "Thrivers feel we've got this. They meet the world on their own terms because they know they can control their own destiny. And so they keep trying despite challenges and are more likely to rebound from those challenges and overcome adversity with confidence." And I just read that. I'm like, this is what we want for our kids. And this is, to really feel equipped to launch, to be self-actualized adults. So just as a way of wrapping up, for parents who crave this and who feel like this, I don't know that this is possible. How do I get from where I am to where I'm going? What is one thing that they can start with even today, right when they're done listening to this podcast? How can they begin to develop this?
Baby steps. The first thing is you will never be able to make a change in no matter what you try unless you buy into the fact that thrivers are made, not born. Once you realize you have power and control over this, mom and dad, it means you're going to change your whole parenting outlook because you realize, my gosh, what a gift I can give my child. The greatest gift, because he's going to use this the rest of his life. Read the book or start looking at research or start talking to other people about thriving. That's really what we're all about. And when we do that, I think that's how we're going to make the major difference in our kids' lives. Little baby steps.
And I would also say too, and I'd love your thoughts on this, I believe so deeply that every challenging situation we have with our child, and however challenging it may feel to us as well, is an opportunity. Like there is learning in all of it. And so, leaning in, right? Leaning into all of it.
Yes. Yes. I'm so with you. I think the other thing is we're so lonely trying to do all this ourselves. Find one person who you can Zoom with, or you can start a little book discussion with, or you can just talk about it. Because the more you get feedback with one another, what you'll see is I'm not alone. She may be doing it slightly different than me. And so what? You're not going to tailor it to Mrs. Jones next door. You're tailoring everything to your child, but you just keep taking little steps along the way. And that's what we'll do. And that's what we've got to do. Because that's how we're going to raise a generation of kids who can thrive and not just struggle, because this is a new world for them and for all of us.
I love that you offer so much hope. And I just hope that listeners are feeling that as well. Again, I think that many parents with differently wired kids, we feel like this is not going to work for our kids. And I'm here to say, I dispute that deeply. And I think this is possible, very much possible. This is work that we as parents can do. We can show up for our kids and they can become resilient. It's really about them understanding who they are and us really respecting who they are, right?
Oh, I love that. I think that's exactly it. Tap into who your child is, because that's how we make a major difference in their lives. And I am convinced on this only because I've had the joy of working with so many kids who over the years overcame. I remember a severe learning disability kid. I kept tracking him. And Scott, what happened to Scott 30 years later? The quietest kid in my classroom is now a DA in Florida. Go figure. I went, how could that be? Another one, Donnie. I remember asking another kid every time I was on the Today Show, one of these kids would call up 30 years later and go, hey, Ms. Borba, how you doing? Donnie, what are you doing? This is a kid who never, ever shut up. He's one of the classic, put a Band-Aid on him. He was on his mouth. He was just wonderful. What is he doing right now? He's a DJ. I went, oh my God, how great is that? Perfect. There's so many stories about those kids when you track them later on, but the commonality they had is a parent who went with their strengths and figured out who the child is and never gave up on that child.
It's so good. Thank you. Well, listen, Michele, thank you, first of all, for writing this book even though you swore off writing yet another book, because again, your body of work. And listeners, definitely check out the show notes. I'll have links to all of Michele's books in there, and you should check them out. They're powerful. They're relatable. Your writing style is super accessible and just warm. You feel like you're having a chat over coffee with someone that you really want to hang out with. So definitely check that out. But is there a place where listeners can learn more about your work or connect with you?
Oh, thank you. My website, micheleborba.com. It has all links to today's show segments, but also little 3-minute clips on how to raise thrivers. Everything is there. There's also a book discussion guide, a PDFs. Just download anything and everything. I'm a 1L Michele. That's all you need to remember. Michele Borba.
Excellent. That's an important distinction. All right. Well, Michele, thank you so much for swinging by the podcast and sharing your brilliance with us today. I really appreciate it.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Tilt Parenting Podcast. For the show notes for this episode, visit tiltparenting.com/podcast and search for this conversation. If you like what you heard on today's episode, I would be grateful if you could take a minute to head over to Apple Podcasts and leave a rating or a review. Thank you so much for helping us stay visible so people who would benefit from the show can easily find it. If you want to support the show and help me cover the cost of production, please consider joining my Patreon campaign. To support the show, just visit patreon.com/tiltparenting. Lastly, if you aren't already part of the online community at Tilt, I invite you to sign up at tiltparenting.com on the box in the bottom where it says Join the Revolution. Every Thursday, I send out a short email with a quick note from me, a link to that week's podcast episode, and links to 5 stories from the news that week that are relevant to parents like us. Again, you can sign up and learn more about Tilt at www.tiltparenting.com.
Hey, are you a parent of a teenager? Are you feeling overwhelmed about how to be what they need while also holding limits and boundaries that keep them safe? Are you tired of conversations that negate how messy this season of parenting is? Well, I've got you. My name is Casey O'Rourke. I am a positive discipline trainer, parent coach, and the host of the Joyful Courage podcast. Every week, I come to you with an interview digging into tough topics with experts I trust and solo shows that go deep into the personal growth and mindset needed to raise teens in a way that grows them into confident, capable young people. I am not afraid of getting real about the intersection of conscious parenting and the teen years, while also bringing in vulnerability, humor, and lightness. I'm walking the path with you and honored to serve. Listen to Joyful Courage on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, or wherever you consume podcasts.